President Carter was invited to Illinois College by Dr. Al-Haftour. So it is most fitting that Dr. Al-Haftour has the pleasure of introducing him. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Al-Haftour to the podium.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. President Jimmy Carter, U.S. Congressman the Honorable Paul Findlay, President Barbara Farley, faculty, student of Illinois College, my Phi Alpha brothers. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is wonderful to be back at Illinois College. Illinois College is very dear a place to my heart. And the credit in introducing me to this place goes to my good friend, the former U.S. Congressman, the Honorable Paul Findlay. I am honored that President Jimmy Carter has accepted my invitation to visit Illinois College, and I look forward to the launch of the Path to Peace initiative with Mr. Carter. Thank you, President Carter. As you all know, President Carter tirelessly calls for solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Through my foundation, the Khalaf Ahmad Al-Haftour Foundation, I have worked with and support Carter Center for several years now, and I will continue to do so in their effort toward the Palestinian-Israeli conflict resolution. I will not dream and stick to the romance idea that the Palestinians will return to Palestine, because there are different facts that have made this impossible, and we have to live with them. President Carter and his team have worked very hard to find solutions. Many like him and Paul are loyal to the cause and will not hesitate to do what it takes. The Palestinian-Israeli struggle is always at the forefront of my thinking, and while exhausting all the current solutions, I thought, why not try a different approach? The idea of this initiative came to my mind, and after careful consideration, I discussed it with my team, and we suggest it to Illinois College. With assistance of Professor Andrew Findlay and the faculty, we have drafted this proposal that we call Pathway to Peace. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome. They should be asked to find scenario and solution to the conflict. They understand what their generation thinks and how they need to address this issue. Pathway to Peace is a seminar focused on historical example of different religion, ethnic and cultural conflict, and the steps taken to resolve those problems. The example of method used to resolve this conflict can be applied as a potential pathway to peace. The faculty and students involved will travel to Jordan, and if the security situation allows, to Palestine and Israel. They will meet with Palestinian and Israeli students. They will try to understand them and their need first. My hope is that they can reach a realistic solution that could help the peace process move forward. I realize that the project might not be successful the first time, but we'll try again and again. This is too important an issue for us not to try every possible way to see it happen. President Carter, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Thank you very much, sir, to be here in front of all these people. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I don't want to speak longer than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, my good friend, and also my new friend, President Barbara Farley, and all of the trustees and professors and students of this wonderful college. It's a great honor for me to be here. I have heard many years about the wonderful work this college has done since its founding in 1829, and I was discouraged and kind of a little bit embarrassed to know that it's older than any college in Georgia. The University of Georgia was founded 4 years after you were, in 1833. Well, I'm also thankful for having been made a member this morning of the Phi Alpha Society, Literary Society. I'm proud to be one of their brothers now, and I look forward to I understand that Mark Twain and Abraham Lincoln are also members in the past, and so I'm the youngest member so far. I may be the oldest member when I was inaugurated into this great society. Well, a lot of people ask me how my life has been in the last few years, and the best response I could give them is a cartoon that was in the New Yorker magazine. This little boy is looking up at his father. He says, "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a former president." Well, I've reached that goal. I'm a former president now, and I have wonderful opportunities to visit 146 countries in the world. The Carter Center has programs in 80 different countries, and to come to exciting events like this is another great privilege of having been a former president. This lecture this afternoon, The Pathways to Peace, is one that I know is interesting to all of you. Most of us have some alignment with religion. I happen to teach Bible classes in my home church every Sunday that I'm there, about 35 times a year. And I know that my worship is to the Prince of Peace. I know that Islam and Buddhism and other religions, great religions, advocate peace and also basic human rights. It's sobering to realize that only once in the history of humanity has the entire world decided to commit itself to peace and human rights. And that was immediately after the Second World War, when over 50 million people were killed in Europe, East, Far East, and around the world. At the end of that war, the 45 or so nations that existed at that time decided to get together and to form the United Nations with a dream of forever having peace. And if there ever was a threat of a war or a conflict within a country or between two countries, the United Nations Security Council would meet, and they, in their wisdom, would decide how to address that conflict, and there would be no more wars. That was the dream. It has not been realized, as you know. Since the Second World War, the United States has been in armed conflict with more than 30 different nations. The other thing that was a dream then, a few years later, was to have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights declared, which from a Christian's point of view, fairly well summarized the basic teachings of our Savior Jesus Christ, the finest aspects of justice and peace and commitment of equality for all human beings. I wrote an op-ed piece in the New York Times last fall and pointed out that the United States is now violating 10 of the 30 paragraphs in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But I was very impressed by the effort made in 1945 to 1948 to bring about these two dreams of humanity. When I was elected president, however, Israel and Egypt had been at war 4 times in the previous 25 years. The United States had been estranged from China for 30 years. The Cold War was ongoing, and there were wars breaking out already in the western coast of Africa and also the east coast, from Ethiopia down to the southwest corner of Africa. Those strains were very difficult for me to accept, but I resolved to do the best I could as president to put into effect, at least during my term of office, the dreams that had been expressed in the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I was able to bring peace between Israel and Egypt for the first time, beginning in the springtime of 1979. And now for 35 years, not a single word of the peace treaty we negotiated has ever been violated. There has been peace to prevail. That same year, I was able to form diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. And now for 35 years, that has transformed in many ways the makeup of the political and economic relationships throughout the world. And when I went out of office at the end of 4 years, we had not fired a bullet, we had not dropped a bomb, we had not launched a missile against another country. Well, in addition to that, when I gave my inaugural speech as president, I announced that human rights would be the basic foundation of our entire foreign policy. So we initiated a deep commitment to implementing all 30 paragraphs of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it had a profound effect on other parts of the globe. For instance, when I was elected president, as you would probably remember, if you go around the South African area, almost all of those countries were military dictatorships. And prior to that, the United States had sent troops in to make sure that no poor people or no indigenous Indians or others would overthrow the dictators who were in charge in those Latin American countries, in Peru, and in Ecuador, and in Chile, and Argentina, and Brazil, and Paraguay, and other countries. Well, by the end of 5 more years, every country in South America had become a democracy, and still is. A little bit different from us. There's only one country still in this hemisphere. It's not yet a democracy, and that's Cuba. And I hope soon we'll lift the embargo against Cuba and have relationships with Cuba that will help them find democracy. When I left the White House, as my wife points out, involuntarily retired by the 1980 election, I was only 56 years old. We had a life expectancy of 25 years, which I've always realized. We didn't really know what to do. So we decided to found what's known as the Carter Center And the Carter Center was dedicated in those early days to becoming a kind of a miniature Camp David. And the idea was that people who had an ongoing conflict or threatened conflict could come to me at the Carter Center, and I would negotiate peace between them if they wanted me to make that attempt. If they wanted me to, I would go to their own country and do the same thing. And the Carter Center still carries out that role. We go to Cuba whenever we want to. We go to North Korea when we go down the list. It would take too much time. But we have tried still to negotiate peace agreements, and that's one of our major commitments. We had this as well, and that is under the umbrella of human rights. If I ask the average student in the class, or even the average adult, what are the major human rights that are important to you, you would probably say freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of worship, trial by jury. That would be about it. But if I go to the 35 countries in Africa where the Carter Center is involved and ask them, what is the basic human right that you feel most precious, they would say, we would like to live in peace. And we would like to have a decent home in which to live. We would like to have food for our children to eat, and a modicum of education, and maybe some health care. You see the difference in attitude depending on how blessed we are with human rights that are basically guaranteed. Almost all of us have a decent home, and we have food to eat, and education, and health care. But without those things, the people suffer. And I would say that peace would be the basic foundation of all of those. I wrote a book called Talking Peace, and I want to make a comment that it was written by Dutton, which is a primary producer of textbooks for classrooms. And Talking Peace is used as a textbook in many colleges and high schools in the United States these days. But it points out the fact that the basic cause of conflicts between two nations, or the basic cause of conflicts between people within a country, a civil war, is almost exactly the same as a conflict between an incompatible husband and wife, or between a father and son, or between two students on the university campus. It's a matter of having a difference that cannot be resolved, and not having enough respect for the other person to discuss that difference and try to resolve it yourself. Or if that's impossible, if one is too proud to acknowledge the other as an equal for communication, then call in an intermediary. So the basic causes of conflict are standard. They're the same. And I know that now with this lecture, that this great college is devoting itself to resolving that. The Carter Center found that when we have a civil war between two generals in a country, quite often the people of that country are tired of the war. And sometimes when they would come to me to negotiate between them, I would find it impossible because they wouldn't relate to each other. The generals wouldn't even let me be the intermediary between them and the other side. So we evolved that concept of the principle of politics, and that is self-delusion. As Paul Finley would know, anybody who runs for office is convinced I am the best candidate and I would be elected. Self-delusion. And I would tell those two generals who were at war, why don't you let the Carter Center come in and hold an honest and fair election, and I'm sure the people of your country will choose the right person to be president. And they always thought I would be the choice, and they let me monitor elections. And the Carter Center just finished monitoring its 96th troubled election in the world. So democracy and freedom. So you see that democracy and freedom are integral aspects of the maintenance of peace within a country or between two countries. The Carter Center is deeply involved in the Middle East. We have full-time office, and it has been that way for 20 years, in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, in the West Bank, and also in Gaza. We have a full-time staff in Gaza. And when I go to the Middle East, I meet with the leaders in Israel, and then go to Ramallah to meet with the Fatah element of the Palestinians, and we also go to Gaza to meet with the people there, because we feel that there must be an end to the war in the Middle East. And I think what my dream has been, for 35 years, is to bring peace to Israel. And there's no way to bring peace to Israel without having peace and justice for their neighbors, the Palestinians. We're still working on that, and we'll continue to do that. The basic principle under which the Carter Center works is the same thing that was established by the United Nations in 1967 when they passed the United Nations Resolution 242. It was voted yes, by the way, by the United States. It was voted yes also by Israel. And it calls for the withdrawal of Israel from occupied territory and also the granting of equal rights to the Palestinian people. That's still the official policy. That's still the official policy of the United Nations, of the United States of America, of every country in Europe, and of almost every country on earth, is to bring about a two-state solution in the Middle East. And that's what the Carter Center is working on. And I'm sure that's what Paul Finley would like to see. I'm sure that's what Dr. Abdul would like to see. It's what the people in Israel would like to see. It's what the Palestinians would like to see. We'll never give up on that effort as long as I have life. And I believe and hope that after this next election, as you know, sometimes American foreign policy is determined, I hate to say this maybe, by the election process. But after the election in November, perhaps the United States will reassert again its effort to bring about an implementation of this dream to bring peace to Israel alongside a peaceful Palestinian state, and that both of them would recognize each other to be able to live in peace. That's what it takes in the future, and I hope it'll come to pass in my lifetime. The Carter Center also has other programs. We have an ability to speak to leaders in the world, since I was the president of the greatest country on earth. And we also have an ability sometimes to let ourselves be heard. I teach at Emory University now. This is my 33rd year as a professor there. And sometimes the news reporters will come to my class when they know I'm going to say controversial things. But also have a chance to write books, and then when I write a book, I can make a tour on the Daily Show and to the New York Times and things like that, and express my views more openly. I've just finished my 28th book, which I think, by the way, is the most important book I've ever written. It's called A Call to Action, and it describes the most horrible human rights abuse that's not addressed in the world today, and that is the discrimination and abuse of women and girls. And alongside bringing peace to the Middle East and other places in the world, the Carter Center will devote a major portion of its effort in the future to alleviating this discrimination. It's not just in foreign countries. The mutilation of women's sexual organs is one of the things that is terrible. In Egypt, where this is not legal, over 90% of every female alive has had her sexual organs mutilated. And in some countries like Djibouti and other countries, it's up as high as 97%. There are 25 countries in Africa where it's over 50%. And it still goes on. This is not mandated in the Quran. It's not mandated in the Bible. But a lot of people continue to do it. You all know about honor killings, where if a girl is raped and she's completely innocent, her family feels that she should be assassinated because she has brought dishonor to the family. And most often that assassination is done, that murder is done by the father, the father's brothers, or quite often in some countries now by younger brothers of the girl. Because if they're under 18 years old and they are found guilty of murder, the punishment will be as a juvenile. The United States is not immune from this embarrassment. Atlanta, Georgia has the distinction of having the busiest airport on earth. In Atlanta, Georgia, every month, there are between 200 and 300 people brought into this country and sold in America as slaves. 80% of those are girls sold into sexual slavery. And the reason Atlanta is so popular in that area is that we have a lot of passengers in our planes from the southern hemisphere, where the girl's skin is brown or black. And they are sold into a brothel for an average of about $1,000 to serve against their will as a sexual slave. Last year, the State Department of the United States is required by law now to give a report on slavery, or human trafficking as it's called. And the State Department reported that in the United States of America now, there are 60,000 people living in slavery, in involuntary servitude. One of the greatest places for abuse against women, sexual abuse, is on the great universities, campuses of America. But the deans and presidents of those universities don't want to admit that those crimes take place on their campus now. So when it happens, the girl is cautioned, don't make an issue of it. Just don't report it. We'll counsel with the boy who's guilty, and maybe it'll go away. And it does go away. As a matter of fact, 41% of all the universities in America have not reported a single sexual assault in the last 5 years. This crime goes on unabated. Now there have been 88 countries named by the Department of Education, which I created, by the way, when I was president, as being violating Title IX, which was originally written to make sure girls had an equal chance to participate in sports on the campuses, as you know. And now they have extended this Title IX section to require that universities do something about it when girls are abused on the college campuses. The Justice Department says that the rapes on the college campuses are primarily perpetrated by just a few boys, who, when they get to college, begin to realize that they can take advantage of girls in this way